I spoke with podcaster Joe Carducci on my Substack Live. It was an excellent conversation. We talked about the shutdown. We talked about where and how Democrats should be positioning themselves. We talked about infighting within the right and infighting within the left. I think it's an excellent conversation. Make sure you're following me on Substack to get these conversations live when they happen. Here's Joe Carducci.
It is great to be with Joe Carducci once again. Joe, I was recently in New Jersey, of all places. I
Oh,
was
really?
driving through the state and I got a very powerful recommendation to stop in Morristown for lunch. And I have to tell you, it was very nice. I had a very nice lunch in Morristown.
No way. Well, first of all, Jersey is spectacular. I want to know what you're doing here. And just passing through, or if it was, yeah. But also, I was born in Morristown. My kids were born in Morristown. My ex-husband was born in Morristown. I used to live not terribly far from Morristown, still not very far from me, but it's a lovely, very historic town, by the way. Where did
It
you
was
have
nice, yeah.
lunch? Do you
I
remember
was
the name?
just passing through on the way to Harrisburg, actually.
Oh,
And I had lunch at a place called Local, Lokl, which was
okay.
very highly recommended.
Oh, okay, that's awesome. Yes, a friend of mine has a restaurant. I can't think of the name now. There in Morristown, but it's a beautiful little town. Jersey's a very surprising little state if you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah.
But if you know, you know. You know what I mean? Like where I am, it's very rural and bucolic, and there's lots of horses and farms. And I have an animal auction about a block and a half from my house in Jersey. So it's one of those things. The Garden State is very versatile. It's not just the turnpike.
Oh yeah, no, I'm learning. I'm learning.
Yeah.
Listen, the shutdown. I mean, listen, I want to hear what you think about these 8 senators who said enough is enough. I'm trying to kind of hold two things as true at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
which is on the one hand, the pain that has been inflicted on everybody from food stamp recipients to just travelers, different levels of pain, obviously, for different people.
Mm-hmm.
It had to end.
Yeah.
It makes sense to act to end it. And so I understand that.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the outcome is so unsurprising because we knew that Republicans were not going to negotiate on Obamacare subsidies. Now it's like there, I guess, will be a vote in December, maybe. Where in my head, I'm sort of like, why even do this in the first place and go through the whole routine of saying we're going to be strong and we're going to persevere and then settle for nothing? Like, I would have understood if at the beginning of this Democrats said the most important thing is we don't want people to lose food stamp benefits. We don't want the pain. We don't have the numbers right now, and we're going to keep government functioning. I wouldn't have faulted them for that. I think
Yeah.
this is a bad outcome.
This is a terrible outcome. It does feel as though it was for nothing. Sorry, my phone has decided to alarm. I'm having one of those technology days, by the way. But it feels like it was an exercise in futility, and it doesn't make sense because what we did have in terms of the high ground here, in terms of the Republicans literally going to the Supreme Court to make sure that human beings, children, 16 million of them, could not get nutrition assistance in this country, like as terrible and awful, and that you don't need to couch or add caveats to any of that. As that was, Republicans were saying out loud that they were using their starvation, their suffering as a political tool. So now not only have we rewarded them for that, which as a parent, I'm a mom, like if your kids do something bad, you try not to reinforce bad behavior with a reward. But now the Republicans have seen that literally starving their own people nets them what they want. So you're right. I think if we had known, and we probably should have been able to forecast that this was going to be the outcome, the Democrats should have figured something else out. The Republicans should have come to the table. That's how democracy works. They are supposed to work across the aisle. They are so dug in now that they don't do that. That's become the way things go. They were not handed a mandate in the Senate. So, I mean, we have a lot of hand wringing going on here, but it is strange to me. And the timing in particular, David, like on the heels of the drubbing that Republicans got on Tuesday, when it seemed as though the American people were saying, we reject that, and the momentum was in the Democrats' court, for that to be the moment when they chose to capitulate to Republicans, it just doesn't make any sense. It feels feckless, and it feels cowardly, and it feels like a betrayal. And all of those people suffered to what end? To reward the Republicans. It makes no sense. It's maddening. And last thing I want to say, to have it be 8 individuals who are very, very safe, 2 of whom are retiring, the other 6 of whom are in no political peril. That seems so calculated and strategic that it feels even more hollow. Do you know what I mean? It's not as if anyone was standing on their integrity or standing on their convictions. They were like, who are the 8 safest people that we can put in this position to be the shields for the other folks? I would rather have a real, earnest debate about this and hear what their convictions actually are. And so it just seems completely meaningless. And that's a bad spot to be in.
Yeah, I appreciate a lot of different perspectives on this and can sort of be swayed within a normal spectrum as to the origins of this and the outcome. The one that is ringing very hollow to me is that these 8 senators are heroes for putting an end to the suffering. Because if that was the only point, you didn't have to do this to begin with. And if
Right.
you were going to do this, coming away with nothing, it seems like the worst possible outcome. It's suffering for no reason whatsoever. So I can kind of I can deal with reasonable people who say, "Oh, there's a lot of gray area here." You understand it, okay? But this is a heroic move by these 8 Democrats. If this is heroic, you could have never shut it down in the first place and just kind of given Republicans what they wanted.
Right. And what it does too is it sort of undermines the argument that this was a Republican shutdown, because that was one of those messaging wars we were in, because Republicans have the House and the Senate and the Oval, and they'd left town in the House. They hadn't been there for 8 weeks. And so
Yep.
that narrative war of them saying it's a Schumer shutdown and the Democrats saying this is your shutdown, you're not coming up with legislation that will compromise with, that is your job. It's incumbent upon you to do that. And you're not doing that in good faith. Now, like to the thing you just said very astutely, that now it looks like, well, it was the Democrats all along. And then for them to just cave, then
Yeah.
people not only hang the shutdown on them, but the suffering that accompanied the shutdown on them, which seems gratuitous and completely unnecessary. So from every angle, they've lost. And that, again, I'm just question, what is the strategy here? Is there a strategy here? And if so, who's responsible for it? Is it Chuck
Yeah.
Schumer, who doesn't want his fingerprints on this when they're very clearly all over it? Going into the holidays when people are suffering to the extent that they did, they came out in droves on Tuesday, historic swing the other direction. And on the heels of that, to say, I can't hear you, I don't understand it.
No, I don't totally understand it either. And, the margin by which there was a talking point, which was true, but like oftentimes something is technically true, but the context is what matters. There was a talking point that Americans knew this was a Republican shutdown. Cool. What was that based on? It was based on polling that was like 55-45. Americans think this is a Republican shutdown rather than a Democratic shutdown. It is true. That's a majority. 55-45 is not super strong. And I can only imagine that now, as a result of this, that small margin will evaporate. And this may even end up being a net problem for Democrats. Now, it may be far enough out before the midterms that it won't end up mattering, and it'll depend on what happens over the next 12 months. But I still think that it's just a net loss all around.
I agree with you. And another thing too is that for quite a while, and it's still happening, Republicans have been the party that has been fractured. That Marjorie Taylor Greene's out there saying her own thing. They have their own opinions on the Nick Fuenteses of the world. They have their own opinions on the Epstein files of the world. It was easy to find the fissures in what was happening with MAGA. And the Democrats, for the most part, well, up until yesterday, really, seem to be marching more in lockstep, which is a critically important thing to do and to signal to the American people, especially on the heels of an election like we had this week. So now, just in an instant, it's completely inverted. So the Democrats look like the party in disarray. They are fighting amongst themselves because this small carve out, which I would argue represents a larger number that did not want to come forward and got together and decided which 8 were going to be the 8 to shield the rest of them. We have vulnerable people like John Ossoff, et cetera. Now the Democrats look like they are the fractured party, and it's very easy for the Republicans. They do it when there are no fractures and fissures to get into those cracks and bust them even more wide open. And that's a disadvantage when we are fighting what we are fighting, and a party that is not beholden to facts or truth or the law or the Constitution for that matter.
No, I agree. And I covered on my show today this Groyp. I'm calling it the Groyper fissure. I love it's not clear whether this is a political problem or one that would be reserved for a gastroenterologist, but the Groyper fissure.
or
It,
or it's a geological fault
yeah,
line
or is it for a
somewhere.
geologist? Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that it's a very interesting thing when we see Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson increasingly at odds, Tucker Carlson and Mark Levin,
Mhm.
et cetera. And it should be sort of a reminder that when that happens on the left, it also looks very bad. Now, this is not me saying there can't be a big tent with disagreement on certain issues. Of course, there can. This is not me saying that you've got to stop all internal disagreements as you get closer to elections, because it's none of that stuff. Like, I think the
Mhm.
debate is good and a big tent is good and there's going to be diversity of opinion. But the appearance of this unhinged disarray that we see, Trump started attacking Marjorie Taylor Greene today after Marjorie
Oh,
Taylor
I
Greene.
didn't see
I don't
that.
know if you saw that. Yeah, he did
No.
one of these unhinged orange rants in the Oval Office. And he said, I don't know what's going on with her. She's placating the other side, sort of stuff. He didn't use the
Huh.
word placating. I don't think he knows that word, but
No. He probably
the
thinks that's a dental term, but yeah.
yes, exactly. There is this. I think it's important to have just an awareness on the left that for the purposes of winning elections and getting power in order to have the opportunity to do pass bills and put policy in place, it's good to recognize what sorts of public disagreements are productive. Like, for example, a robust primary where someone comes out the winner. I think that that's productive public disagreement. That's a great thing.
Yeah.
Litmus testing and purity beatings, I think, are less productive. And so I think it's just like something to keep in mind.
No, I agree with you 100%. And again, that's what we saw in New York City, right? A robust political process where the people got to be able to have their voices heard in the way that it's designed to go. And I think that's when you see people engaging. That's when you see them trusting the process, right? And wanting and getting excited about being able to shape their own realities, their own futures, their own tomorrows. And I think for far too long, our party, and I don't, want to do the autopsy, et cetera, but our party has suffered from what I call the Veruca Salt syndrome. They're very precious about everything has to be exactly what they want all the time, but they've also been sort of elitist, and they've managed to cut out a lot of people who feel like they're not being seen or heard or represented, and then they don't want to partake in the process. And then when you have these kinds of fissures and cracks where you're like, these 6, 8 people, I don't even know who they are. And I don't understand what has happened, but they certainly don't look like they represent me. So I don't want to engage in any of this now, even more so than before. And again, what Tuesday showed us on so many levels was that people were fired up and excited. They wanted to participate coming out of No Kings, that they wanted to have a voice, that they were charged up and energized and being able to, actually make a change. And then to see all of that work and that energy and that effort and that excitement fall to the wayside in the hands of 8 individuals who don't live the reality, the shared reality that most of us live. They're not worried about healthcare. We don't have a private elevator. You know what I mean? So to see that, it's very disheartening, and it can be very disillusioning. And what I'm worried about, again, to that net negative that you're talking about, what I'm worried about is that kind of stuff will settle in and people will say, I've seen people, maybe you have too, in my DMs and stuff, it really makes it hard to want to get out there and fight when what I do is basically thrown away. And I can't fault anybody for feeling like that, but I would argue that means that this is a moment all the more that we, the people, have to make ourselves heard. I don't think that it was ever going to be anybody from this this class of established Democrat that was going to come to the rescue. It has to be driven by us. And that, if I'm taking anything out of this moment, it is that we have to continue to galvanize, and we have to continue to coalesce, and we cannot rely on the status quo.
I was sort of chuckling to myself, but on the edge of crying. Like, I was laughing to avoid crying. It was this press conference last night that these senators who were voting to reopen gave. I don't remember whether it was Jean Shaheen or Maggie Hassan. It was one of the two. And basically, the question that was asked was, if you don't get this healthcare vote in December, might you vote to shut down the government in January? And the answer, it wasn't, it was sort of like, that's a possibility. We're going to have to see. And I'm thinking to myself, with what leverage in order to achieve what? The big threat is, if you don't give us the healthcare vote, we'll do the same thing again where we got nothing and a bunch of people got denied SNAP benefits and 50% of flights were delayed or canceled. Like, I just don't understand the game.
I don't think they do either. That's the thing, where I don't think that sometimes, I joke that it's the Republicans that are, playing checkers to the Democrats playing chess. But when you look at this, it's like the Republicans just left the game and let the Democrats defeat themselves. Like, I don't even understand. Again, what is your position here? Because if you cracked, especially, again, I know I sound like a broken record, but if you cracked in the wake of the American people loudly rejecting Trumpism and MAGA and Republicans and everything that they're doing. And while we still had them, even though it wasn't a wide swath, we still had them responsible for what was happening. We still had the moral high ground. We still had Donald Trump bulldozing the White House and building a ballroom while fighting in the Supreme Court to make sure that his own voters, among the 42 million, that couldn't eat. We still had the optics of a Gatsby party versus the starvation of the American people. And we took that opportunity, and that's a screwed up word to use here because this is terrible stuff. This is suffering on a level people can't, unless you have been there, to be hungry, to be in a grocery store and wondering if you can buy a jar of pasta sauce or if you could keep your lights on. You know what I mean? Like, this is real trauma. This country's been inflicted, a great deal of trauma has been inflicted on this country as of late, from the deportations and disappearances to starvation to the White House, et cetera, et cetera. And again, like you said, so they're going to go back in January and we're going to redo all of this. Like, no one's going to tap in. No one's going to trust. Why would we? And so it's like, I wish, it's sound and fury. And I wish I had a silver lining to approach their strategy here. But honestly, I just think we need fundamental change. And I know that there's a chorus of people out there saying that Chuck Schumer should not be in leadership anymore. And I would agree. I would agree. I don't know the mechanism, how easy it is to do that. I admittedly don't know. I think there are plenty of able-bodied human beings. I know Van Hollen, there has been talk about him, but I think that is one thing that might be worth exploring. I think the Democrats need an infusion of a perspective that is more tapped in and in touch with the actual American people. And I don't think that the leadership on the Senate side in particular at this moment is that.
Yeah, I interviewed Seth Moulton today, the congressman who's primarying Senator Ed Markey, and he said he would, if he got a vote, if he became senator and got a vote, he would not vote for Schumer to be in leadership. I had this incredibly dystopian experience. I was in D.C. over the weekend for CrookedCon, and I put out a tweet about this, but I didn't tell the full story. I went to dinner with a friend at some a rooftop restaurant very close to the White House.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this is not an exaggeration. As we were having dinner, there's bright lights and cranes. And I look over and I'm like, what is that right there? And she goes, oh, that's Trump's construction at the White House. And I'm like, it's 10 p.m. What? She's like, oh, it's going and going. So this government was shut down at the time. People were lacking food stamps. 50% of flights were delayed and canceled. And literally at 10 p.m., I'm dining as the construction that, the cranes and everything is destroying parts of the White House. 300 million, 325 million. I don't even know what the price is at this point. The only, if I have to find some silver lining here, and it's extraordinarily difficult, I wonder if there are people who, aside from who they blame for the shutdown, which is essentially 50-50, like it's this 55-45 thing, but I think that's kind of been squandered.
Yeah.
Maybe there will be the food stamp recipients will know Trump didn't care and Republicans didn't care about us being hungry. Whoever's responsible for the shutdown, there was money that was there which could have been used and it wasn't used. He clearly doesn't actually care as he was flying around on Air Force One and building the maybe there's something there. I don't know, but it's a very low bar I'm looking for.
I would say yes, there is. I put out a video, well, maybe last week, a couple days ago. It just occurred to me, to your point, that here's something that people. I don't care how you vote. You can understand this. You can understand when, and a lot of Trump voters are SNAP recipients in the state of Oklahoma, which overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump. It's like 600,000 people. It's one out of every 8 Americans, period. So you know that there are a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump that have been swept up into that. And Bassett was on MSNBC, or maybe it was Meet the Press, I forget. And he was asked before they appealed, when the courts weighed in and said you have to feed people, you have to reinstate these SNAP benefits. And then Besson was asked, he won't appeal this, right? And he said, oh, no, never. Because the optics, right? And so you shouldn't believe Besson. But what did he do? Yeah, he appealed that. And that was so on the nose, and coupled with that Gatsby party. And people said that's a distraction. He's trying to make you look at the shiny object over there. We're very visual creatures. Human beings are very visual creatures. And there is a tie between Trump's unfavorability and those images, those first images of the White House being flattened, that all of a sudden, in correlation with that, causation correlation, I'm not even sure specifically that it's exactly this, but there was a spike and it continued to go up because I think these physical, visual manifestations, embodiments of what they are doing, they resonate with people. They cross party lines. I can't think of the most MAGA-iest MAGA person in the world waking up on a Thursday morning going, you know what I hope happens today? I hope they tear down the East Wing of the White House. I don't want them to mention it to us. I don't want them to ask us about it. I just want them to do it. And then I want them to talk about building a ballroom while my SNAP benefits are gone. So, like, I think that those connections, like you said, I think also that's how we got some of those Republicans and some MAGA. Even I had Tom Malinowski on. He's running now for Mikey Sherrill's seat, New Jersey 11. He's great. And he was saying, in New Jersey in particular, quite a few people who voted for Donald Trump flipped around, showed they completely went the other direction. And I think a lot of it is that you can tell someone that things are worse than they actually are, a la Biden's economy, et cetera, but you can't make them feel like things are better when they're really struggling and when they're looking at the person at the top, telling them, I don't care about you. I'm not going to feed you. I'm going to fight to starve you. You can't, I don't think you can message or spin your way out of that.
Can we briefly talk about Trump's 50-year mortgage idea? Because I've been wanting to talk about this. This is one of it's truly unbelievable. If the idea is housing's too expensive, let's figure out a way to make housing more affordable. A 50-year mortgage is a terrible idea. And I'm going to do a bigger deep dive on this tomorrow with my audience. But fundamentally, it's going to raise prices. Because what people have to remember is, imagine that you could just pick a number. Imagine you can afford $1,000 a month mortgage, right? I'm just making these numbers up. If it's a 30-year mortgage, that would allow you to get, for example, a $300,000 house.
Mm-hmm.
If all of a sudden it's a 50-year mortgage, that $1,000 payment, which is what you can afford, now makes it so you could bid on a $400,000 or $500,000 house. So what does it do? It makes more people able to afford, and I'm using the term afford very loosely here, makes more people able to afford a more expensive home, meaning more bidders enter the market for homes that are more expensive, which drives the price up.
Right.
And meanwhile, because of how mortgages amortize, you're building up equity even more slowly. Like it's quite literally a way for banks to make money while pushing real estate prices up. You're doing nothing about supply, which is fundamentally what we need to do. It's hard to think of a worse idea for affordability than saying 50-year mortgages.
It's almost as if It's almost as if the guy who bankrupted casinos, who failed at everything from water
Right.
to steaks to airlines to board games, the guy who is banned from having a charity in New York, it's almost as if the guy who's been bankrupt, I don't know what, 6 times? Is that right? It's almost as if the guy who left with the largest amount of debt relative to the size of our economy in our history, the second worst jobs president next to Herbert Hoover in our history, the guy who without COVID even, it was everything he inherited from Obama was moving the wrong direction. It's almost as if he is not the right person to handle the United States economy. I mean, I know that's crazy, but like,
Yeah.
it's almost as if we are all Trump Taj Mahal. And yet, somehow there was this collective amnesia. I think of it like my C-section. Like, I had my son, it was a C-section. It was the most horrible pain in recovery I'd ever known in my life. But by the time I got home from the hospital, I was like, I want another one because you just forget. And our country went through some kind of weird collective amnesia when it came to Donald Trump and his performance on the economy. But to your point, this $2,000 stimulus check is exactly the same thing. It is inflationary at best. It's going to drive prices up because people are going to want to buy things, and there's not going to be the supply for them to buy things. So the demand and the supply are not going to meet. So
Well,
that
not
means
only that, but did you hear what Besson said about what it would actually be?
yes, it was the tax cuts they've already instituted,
Yeah,
right?
it wouldn't really. We're giving everybody $2,000, but we're not actually sending you any money. We're going to do it through tax policy, which is like, no, you're not doing anything.
The tax policy, by the way, which benefits the richest of the rich and
Right.
never trickles down, never ever trickles down. Just take a look at those gaps between CEOs and employees. Like, it never trickles down. It's never intended to trickle down. And the irony of ironies is that they went to the Supreme Court to make sure that starving children in this country couldn't get the $7 a day that they needed to eat, but they made those tax cuts for the ultra rich permanent. They found the money to do that and the money to give ICE $50,000 signing bonuses. And the chef's kiss on all of this? College debt forgiveness. This is the kicker. I'm old enough to remember when every Republican lost their minds because Biden did that. And now they're like, oh, yeah, let's give it to these mass goons who are putting kids in cars with long guns. Yeah, that's a good idea. Oh, we're not going to fund SNAP. We're going to fight that all the way to the Supreme Court. Sure. But let's fund ICE. I mean, it's just insane. We have money. We have money for days. We have money to send to Argentina, $40 billion. We have money for Kristi Noem to fly around with her boy toy on 2 private jets so she can ride horses in freaking Nicaragua or Ecuador or wherever the hell they were cosplaying cowboys. Like, we have the money. It's just that they want us fighting with each other. They want the middle class fighting with the people who are lower than the middle class in terms of poverty level. They want us fighting while they run away with everything at the top.
Listen, Joe, you've really said it all. I don't think I could possibly add anything to what you've said. I want to, as always, thank you for talking to me. If you're one of my viewers watching today, make sure you're subscribed to Joe's Substack. And if you're one of Joe's viewers, I would be humbled if you also subscribe to mine. Let's do it again soon.
Yes, please. Thank you so much, David. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And thank you to everybody. And again, like David said, please, if you're following me, please go and subscribe to him. He's an amazing guy and a new father to boot. So not a new father first time.
On the seat section thing, when we got home from the hospital 3 months ago, we said we are never doing that again, and it is never happening again. That we've decided.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, take care. It's good to see you.
All right,
Thanks,
take care, Joe.
everybody.
We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.